Good morning, everybody. Fun Bun here. We're going to get to go over Gatsby Chapter 2 today. So I hope you're ready. If you remember in Chapter 1, we saw Nick, our narrator. We were introduced to him and to his cousin and to his cousin's wife. Their names are Daisy and Tom Buchanan. Daisy and Tom are from old money, and they have whatever they want, but their life is a little bit monotonous. That means like it's kind of the same all the time, every day, which can get boring. It really can. I don't know if you've ever had those phases in life, but you will probably at some point when you just, do the same thing over and over and over again, and you start looking for something new. And that's kind of what they were in, because that's a little bit like what old money does a lot of times, especially in the Roaring 20s when, they couldn't just go everywhere, do everything because, there was different technologies and that sort of thing. It would take you a month to get to Europe if you wanted to go there, not just catch a plane and be there in a couple hours. So, it was a thing. But anyways, we're introduced to them, and we're introduced to East Egg and to West Egg, where the new money and the old money is. And then Tom lives there, and he's kind of caught in between because he doesn't really have any money, but he's got the old money background. And so he knows, like, socially what's what, but doesn't have any money. It doesn't have a big mansion or anything like that. At one point, he even says he was too poor to get married to somebody that wanted to marry him in the Midwest, which is sad for him, I guess. Although, maybe if she just wanted money, maybe he lucked out. I don't know. Anyways, at the end of the chapter, we finally see Mr. Gatsby. Nick goes home after the dinner party, and he notices Mr. Gatsby in Mr. Gatsby's front yard because they're neighbors, so he saw him out in his yard. And he goes out to the water, and he looks across the water from West Egg to East Egg, and there's a green light in the distance. And he sees the green light, and he kind of holds up his hand like maybe he could catch it. And of course he can't because it's a light. And what it really is a green light in a lighthouse that's on the other side of the bay. But Nick doesn't really know why he's doing it. He just sees Gatsby having this moment, looking at the light across the bay, and then he looks back again, and Gatsby's just gone because, like, he had stuff to do, I guess. I don't know what he was doing. It's his house, and it's his yard, and it's his beach, so he could do what he wants to do. But, like, he wasn't there anymore, and Nick's like, oh, that's weird. Keep the green light in mind, because it's a big thing later on, and we'll talk about what it means later on. But I want you to know about it. I want you to know that it's there. I think you'll see that in today's clip from the movie too, okay? So he sees the green light, wonders what that is. You guys can wonder about that too, and wonder what it might represent. Remember how symbols represent something else? Well, this green light, I guarantee you, it's going to be a symbol, but it's not sure what it's a symbol of. We also see another symbol in Chapter 2 of The Great Gatsby, because what happens is Nick decides that he's going to go hang out with Tom a bit. Tom's like, hey, we should go on into the city, and I want you to meet some people and stuff like that. So they get in Tom's car, and they drive, they get on the train, I guess. They didn't use a car this time. But they get on the train, and they go through a place called the Valley of Ashes. And in the Valley of Ashes, we see, like, the third location for our book. The Valley of Ashes is the poor area. All the factories and all the people like that do factory stuff kind of dump all their garbage and ash and everything else in this one area. And there's still some people who live there, and not a very nice place to live. This is where all the really, really poor, uncultured people are. And there's a garage there, like a gas station that fixes cars, garage. And that garage, it's run by a man named Mr. Wilson, and they stop. Tom and Nick stop, and while they're there, Tom, makes some whisper with Mrs. Wilson, and then they get on the train, and they head into the city, and Mrs. Wilson goes on the train and goes into the city, too. And it turns out that she does that because, Tom and her are doing exactly what Jordan said Tom was doing with somebody. They're having an affair. So, that's not a good thing. And Tom actually keeps an apartment in the city that is the apartment he goes to have his affair with Mrs. Wilson. Her name is Myrtle. Mrs. Wilson's name is Myrtle. Myrtle Wilson. That's her name. Anyways, she's not very much like Daisy at all. And Nick kind of describes her as a woman who's not like super pretty. Of course, we all know he thinks his cousin Daisy is a little bit, prettier than maybe he should think his cousin Daisy is. But she's got a vitality, is the way that Nick describes her. Let's see. I heard the footsteps on the stairs. I'm going to quote the book here. And I heard the footsteps on the stairs, and in a moment, the thickish figure of a woman blocked out the light from the office door. She was in the middle 30s and faintly stout, but she carried her surplus flesh sensuously, as some women can. Her face, above a spotted dress of dark blue, contained no facet or gleam of beauty, but there was an immediate, perceptible vitality about her, as if the nerves of her body were continually smoldering. So she's got personality. She seems like the kind of person who's intense and passionate and fiery, even though she's not just like, the drop-dead gorgeousest person that Nick has ever seen. At least that's his description of her. So they go into town, and Tom's like, okay, this is Myrtle. She's my lady, and we have an apartment, and we go stay there together sometimes. And imagine that. Tom is saying this to Nick. Nick is Daisy's cousin. Daisy is Tom's wife. Like, there's some shenanigans going on here. Like, well, how do you say that to your cousin, man? Like, your cousin-in-law. What is he gonna tell Daisy? But doesn't seem like he does. Actually, Nick doesn't snitch, I guess. But I'm not sure that's a good thing. Like, he should maybe be a little more protectful of his cousin. That's what I think. But, I guess he makes that choice. And he told us about it, so I guess he's not too ashamed. And I guess, yeah, well, he does some other things later on, too, that I guess this maybe is just the first thing that we can look at Nick and be like, really, dude? You gonna do that? You gonna be that way? Well, here he is. So he goes with them. They throw together this little party. Myrtle gets her sister to come over. Some of the people who live in the apartment building come over. Along the way, Myrtle's like, I need to buy this and this and this. And she's going to take some advantage of Tom and his money. But that's really what she's interested in, is leading the wealthy old money lifestyle that she's never had, because she's like super, super duper poor. But they buy a dog, and they get some like magazines, and she wants a new dress, and stuff like that. And they go to the apartment and leave Nick in the living room while they have some alone time. And then the party happens, and by the end of the day with Tom and Myrtle, Myrtle said something. Tom got angry. Tom punches her in the face. That's his girlfriend. Punches his girlfriend in the face. Breaks her nose. It's a whole thing. Nick decides to leave at that point. And doesn't end up going home until like 4 a.m. the next day. Because he goes to some photographer's house to see some of the guy's artwork. And so that's a whole thing that he did. And there's some weirdness going on here. Like, if I was Nick, I would be like, dude, you can't tell me you're cheating on my cousin. And I wouldn't think that was a good thing at all. And that's mean for Daisy's sake. But, Nick doesn't do that. So we're going to learn a little bit about Tom, because we know for sure he's having an affair. And we meet Myrtle, and she's the type of woman who's super angry with her husband and is having an affair. So, like, we know that about her. And then we have Tom definitely having the affair, and then Nick not saying anything about it to anybody. So conflict is brewing. Conflict is the driving force when it comes to reading any kind of story. It's the problem that makes people have to fight with each other and come up with a solution. And so the conflict that's starting to brew here is obviously Tom and Daisy are having some marital problems, because Tom's stepping out with this lady Myrtle. And then, that's gonna come out at some point. People already know. Jordan knew. It seems like Daisy knew, who was on the phone the other night at the dinner party. So that's gonna be a big to-do that comes up later on in the book. So Nick goes home, and that's his kind of more in-depth look at what Tom was doing. And then we're going to, in the next chapter, finally actually meet Gatsby, because we're going into chapter 3 here of a book called The Great Gatsby, and we haven't even met Gatsby yet. Like, that's weird. The other big thing to see is there's a big billboard in the Valley of Ashes. A optometrist, that's a doctor who like gives you glasses and looks at your eyes. Well, does the glasses part. The optometrist does the glasses. There's actually an ophthalmologist who diagnoses problems with your eyes. That's a different thing. It doesn't matter. Neither here nor there. But, excuse me. There's an optometrist who put a billboard up in the Valley of Ashes that's right across the street from Myrtle and George. Her husband's name is George. Myrtle and George's garage. And on it are a giant pair of eyes. It's the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. So you're going to hear about those a bit. They're another symbol. They're going to mean something. And I want to put them on your radar because we'll see them in the show. And we'll also talk about them a little bit more. And, you know, this is what Fitzgerald says about it. Above the gray land, and the spasms of bleak dust which drift endlessly over it, you perceive, after a moment, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are blue and gigantic. The retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face, but instead from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles, that's glasses, which pass over a non-existent nose. Evidently, some wild wag of an oculist set them there to fatten his practice in the borough of Queens. It's a billboard, but it takes special meaning to the people who live there, especially Mr. George Wilson later on. So we'll keep our eyes out for the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg and the green light as we go forward. Now, does this change your impression of Tom? We already kind of thought he was a not so nice fella, because we already thought maybe he was cheating on his wife. Now we know it for sure. We thought maybe he was a little bit abusive. Seems like he is, because he just broke Myrtle's nose. What do you think about him? But maybe a more interesting question is, what do you think about Nick, who is going along with this affair that his cousin's husband is having, and doesn't say anything, doesn't stop anything. He's just like, sure, I'll go meet your girlfriend. That's not a good thing either, right? Does it add to this discussion of whether or not Nick is a reliable narrator? Do we trust him more or less because he told us this thing that, you know, maybe isn't looking so great for him? That's a good question. All right. We'll talk about more stuff. We'll talk about chapter 3. We'll get into the rest of this book. It's going to be a good one. In the meantime, though, this is Fun Bun. Over and out.